Your Creative Force by Avianne is currently available on Global Voice Radio.
Talent is a flame. Genius is a fire. Broadcasting from the San Francisco Bay Area, the all-new all-hit show on creativity. Hosted by international award-winning artist and entrepreneur, Avianne. You're listening to Your Creative Force. And now here's your host, Avianne.
Hi, this is Avianne coming to you once again from the lovely San Francisco Bay Area in California, the USA. I am so excited about today because I get to interview Miss Carol Davies. And wow, what an amazing person I get to interview today. And we're going to interview her on the topic of utilizing intuition, which is also our show theme for today. Episode 27 of Your Creative Force, Utilizing Intuition, an interview with Carol Davies. Intuition is probably the most underutilized asset of many business owners. Inexperienced business owners tend to be moved either by fear on one end of the spectrum or being overly zealous on the other end of the spectrum. There is so much wisdom and balance that come with learning how to utilize our intuition in a rational way. Yet few of us ever learn to apply this skill in business. Women are naturally capable of strong intuition, but we are often not taught or even encouraged to apply it in the business world. In episode 27 of Your Creative Force, I'm going to interview a very seasoned personal success coach. She's a business owner. She does amazing work with clients all over the world. Her name is Carol Davies. And before her interview, I will totally tell you a lot more about Carol and what she does and who she is exactly. We are also going to look at what scientists like Dr. Kelly Turner can tell us about intuition. Because believe it or not, and that is actually part one of our show today, is looking at what science tells us about intuition. It is actually something that scientists have studied because it's so fascinated, right? Intuition is also called that gut feeling that you get, right? It's this sixth sense. It's this inexplicable thing that you just feel and you just sense and you just know about a situation or a person. But oftentimes we are not tuned into that and we don't make room for our intuition. Right? Intuition to me is creative force to a large degree. It is connected to your creative force. It is that place inside of you where you find the answers and you know what you're doing and you know how to listen to yourself and hear your own voice in all the craziness that goes on around us all the time, right? So let's jump right in. What does science tell us about intuition, what it is and how it operates biologically? Now, Dr. Kelly Turner is the New York Times best-selling author of Radical Remission, as well as a researcher and lecturer in the field of integrative oncology. Her specialized research focus is on radical remission of cancer, which is when someone heals from cancer against all odds. Dr. Turner holds a BA from Harvard University and a PhD from the University of California, Berkeley. You can learn more about Dr. Turner at drkellyturner.com. And the following article was published in Psychology Today and is derived from Dr. Turner's book on the topic. Okay. This article, according to my sources, was published in 2014. I find it so fascinating because here is a doctor who's actually really scientific, right? She's a researcher. She specializes in cancer. So she's all about science and biology, right? And yet she found it so fascinating how these patients were just healing against all odds that she actually stumbled upon this topic of intuition and that she was actually wanting to research it. So, the science behind intuition by Dr. Kelly Turner. Why you should trust your gut. And this is what she writes. Almost every radical remission cancer survivor I've studied used their intuition to help make decisions related to their healing process. Research on intuition and following your gut instinct may explain why. Scientists have discovered that humans appear to have two very different operating systems. Now, before I go further with this article by Dr. Turner, I just want to say something here to you. I am not a doctor, and I am definitely not making any recommendations to you by reading this to you about how you should go about your treatment should you be someone who is having the unfortunate experience of facing cancer, okay? I'm not diagnosing. I'm not making a judgment call. I am not biased in any sort of way with regards to how cancer treatment works. I don't have any knowledge or insights on the topic. So please don't take this as the Bible of medical advice about what you should do with your cancer or not, because this is totally not my intention. I just want to be very clear about that, because I am not a medical professional and I'm also not a psychologist or a psychiatrist. I am just simply reading this to bring to you the fascinating science and biology behind intuition that someone like Dr. Callie Turner came across. I just find this really amazing because it's actual studies that actually legitimately prove the fact that we do have intuition and that intuition is of value for us, right? I am not telling you to use intuition to cure cancer. Just be clear on that, okay, guys? So let's go. Scientists have discovered that humans appear to have two very different operating systems. System 1 is our quick, instinctual, and often subconscious way of operating. It is controlled by our right brain and by other parts of our brain that have been around since prehistoric times, known as the limbic and reptilian parts of the brain. System 2 is our slower, more analytical, and conscious way of operating. It is controlled by our left brain and by newer parts of our brain that have only developed since prehistoric times, also known as the neocortex. Researchers have found that intuition is part of System 1, which is why it comes on so rapidly and often does not make rational sense to us. In other words, intuitive decisions are not something that we have thought out carefully with reason, but rather choices that have arisen quickly out of instinct. But why exactly should we trust our gut instinct? Well, one reason would be because researchers have found that System 1 often knows the right answer long before System 2 does. Isn't that fascinating? For example, in one study, researchers asked their subjects to play a card game where the goal was to win the most money. What the subjects did not realize, however, is that the game was rigged from the start. There were two stacks of cards to choose from. One was rigged to provide big wins, followed by big losses, while the other deck was set up to provide small gains but almost no losses. Okay, are you ready? This is what they found, right? It took about 50 cards before the subject said they had a hunch about which deck was safer, and about 80 cards before they could actually explain the difference between the two decks. However, what is most fascinating is that after only 10 cards, the physical sweat glands on the subject's palms opened slightly every time they reached for a card in the dangerous deck. It was also around the 10th card that the subject started to favor the safer deck without being consciously aware that they were doing so. Remember, the subjects in the study did not know that the decks were rigged, right? In other words, long before the analytical brain could explain or figure out, right, what was going on, the subject's bodily intuition already knew where there was danger and guided them towards safety. And guys and girls, they could actually measure this. Isn't that amazing? Okay. Another study, looked at people's ability to predict whether a picture was behind curtain number 1 or curtain number 2. However, this was done on a computer, so there were no actual curtains involved. Now, just like with the card study I just told you guys about, right, the researchers also measured the subject's subtle psychological responses. Remarkably, they found that the subjects' bodies were able to predict the correct curtain 2 to 3 seconds before the computer had even decided which curtain to use. Isn't that fascinating? The subjects did not always follow through with what their slightly sweaty palms were telling them to do, however. But the slightly sweaty palms were almost always right. In fact, they even had the ability to predict the future by about 2 to 3 seconds. For gamblers who would like to have the ability to predict what's behind a certain card, this study suggests that they should work on heightening their sense of intuition to such a degree that they can recognize when the sweat glands on their palms have opened up. Wouldn't that be something, right? You would win a lot of money if you were to gamble based on this. But wow, right? I'm reading this and I'm thinking to myself, it's really true. Our gut is a real thing. Intuition is really a thing, and it's an important thing, right? Finally, other studies have found that when it comes to making major life decisions, such as which house to buy or which person to marry, trusting your intuition leads to better outcomes than trusting your logical thinking brain. In one study, car buyers who had plenty of time to pore over all of the information about their various car choices were later found to be satisfied with their purchase only 25% of the time. Meanwhile, those buyers who made a quick, intuitive decision about their car purchase were found to be satisfied with their purchase 60% of the time. I can tell you that is definitely true of me. When I bought my car, I don't drive a fancy car, right? Because I need my car to do a job. I need my car to be big. I need my car to be tough because I load a bunch of artwork. I load my kid. I need to see where I'm going. I drive in bad weather sometimes on the freeway. So I wanted a 4x4. I wanted a reliable car, and I wanted the car to be big enough to manage up to an 8-foot painting if I had to load it into the car, right? So, and I'm not going to tell you which car I have because this is not a car commercial, but I literally decided, okay, this is the kind of brand I want because I kind of think that this brand would be reliable, and I'm going to find this brand of car. It's going to do the job I want. I just want it to have good mileage for the size car it is. And I'm going to go in, I'm going to find this car, I'm going to buy this car, I'm going to walk out. And the sales guy, the car sales guy was so fascinated because I intuitively already for a long time had the sense that this is the car I want. I walked onto the lot. He was still trying to show me a bunch of cars, and I just looked at him. I'm like, listen, you don't have to take your time or convince me. I already know what car I need. I already know what car I want, and I just want to buy this car. Do you have a car that is like this on the lot? And he said yes, and he walked me over to the car, and he said to me, yes, this is a good car for you. The mileage is slightly high because I don't believe in buying new cars in general, right? I looked at the car. I said to him, you know what? These cars have such a good track record of going for a lot of mileage before they have issues. I'm just going to take this car anyway. I said to him, give me your best deal. I bought the car, and 3 hours later, everything was sorted. The paperwork was done. I got the car and I drove away. I went there, got the car, and left. And that is how I do things like that. Now, that doesn't mean I didn't think about it at all. It just means that my intuition, my strength, which is my creative force inside of me, was for a long time already telling me, you need a bigger car, you need this kind of car, get a reliable car, and just do it, right? And I just didn't pay attention to it until one day I woke up. I'm like, you know what? I really need to just go buy this car. And so I did, okay? So your intuition can also come, right? It's that small silent voice, that creative force inside of you that's whispering to you all the time. So I can definitely identify. I'm super happy with my car, by the way. This car is an older car. It's got a lot of mileage on it. I'm taking care of my car. I love this car. I will probably drive this car until the wheels fall off, right? So I'm super happy with my car, which was basically a pretty intuitive decision for me to make, right? I think I would have given my ex-husband a heart attack if I did ever buy a car like that while we were still together. So fortunately, I got this car before I was married again, right? Because I don't think a husband is going to be really pleased if you buy a car like that. But I knew I was doing the right thing, and I was really super happy, still happy, right? Now, concluding this article, okay, that Dr. Kelly Turner has brought to us here, such a wonderful doctor for having studied this and pointed out this research results for us like this. She writes, while I was personally surprised to have intuition come up over and over again in my research on radical remission cancer survivors, the studies described above tell me that I should not be surprised at all. Because our intuition often knows what's best for us, even when our thinking minds do not understand yet what's going on. That's because intuition operates from the part of our brain that developed at a time when hidden dangers could jump out at us at any moment, such as a tiger hiding behind bushes. This part of our brain became highly skilled at sensing immediate danger as well as places of safety. However, because most of us now live a relatively safe day-to-day existence, that part of our brain is not triggered very often, and when it is, we are not familiar with it, so we tend to ignore its messages. However, we all still have that part of our brain, and the radical remission survivors I study have learned how to use it to their advantage. Okay? So it's a process. It's things that you already have inside of you, but you're just not used to using it, right? And in my interview with Carol, we are going to talk about some ways that you can bring that to the forefront. Okay? So yes, major cliffhanger. We're going to end this first part of our show on today, but we are going to totally look at how you use intuition, examples of intuition, right? And we're going to talk about how each of us experience this. It's very unique from person to person. So you are going to have a blast staying with us in our show today. Anyway, this post in Psychology Today was based on an excerpt from the New York Times best-selling book Radical Remission, Surviving Cancer Against All Odds by Dr. Kelly Turner. She is the New York Times best-selling author of Radical Remission, as well as a researcher and lecturer in the field of integrative oncology. Her specialized research focus is on radical remission of cancer, which is when someone heals from cancer against all odds. You can learn more at drkellyturner.com, dr.kellyturner, Kelly Turner.com, and also at radicalremission.com, just spelled as the words are, right? So, wow. Thank you, Dr. Kelly Turner, for this amazing article. And with that, and before we jump in with Carol here, I'm going to get Carol on the line, and we are going to end part one of our show here today. And our show theme for today is utilizing intuition. And we'll be back shortly with part two, starting our interview with Carol Davies.
Catch the fire of creativity. Visit artbyavianne.com. Avianne. And now we return to our show with Avianne.
Hi, this is Avianne, everyone, and we are back with part two of our show today. And we are going to do an interview today with Carol Davies. Carol is a certified professional coach whose passion is to assist individuals and groups to achieve better life performance. She uses a variety of methods and practices, including success coaching, EFT or tapping, emotional freedom techniques, NLP, neuro-linguistic programming, guided visualizations, mindfulness, meditation, and positive self-talk, among others. These help clients resolve issues around personal and professional challenges in their lives. With EFT, you can effectively resolve emotional, physical, and mental distress at the source, often within minutes. She is also a certified passion test facilitator. Having worked abroad for more than 20 years in large international organizations, including the United Nations, her considerable management and coaching experience, combined with her extensive training and expertise in holistic healing and energy therapies, give her a unique approach. Her extensive work with women entrepreneurs from different cultural backgrounds has given her a deep insight into the diverse ways that people can approach life. She takes into account the woman as a whole, her life in context, not just focusing on isolated goals or behaviors. By combining her skills of coaching and energy work, Carol empowers people. Okay, and there's many more things I can tell you about Carol, but we are going to keep it at that. Wow, Carol has quite the biography. And let's say hi to Carol. Hi, Carol. How are you today?
Hi, Avianne. I'm doing really well today, and where I am, it's pretty cold, and we've got snow coming down. So I'm really happy to talk to someone who's in a sunny, warm environment.
Oh, yes. California's been windy. Here where I am in San Francisco, it's been windy lately. But yeah, we're certainly more sunny, I think, than you guys are over there. Okay.
Well, we had sun yesterday,
yes.
And now we have typical, it's winter weather.
Oh, wow. Okay, so we are with episode 27 of Your Creative Force, and our theme for today is utilizing intuition. And Carol, I have been dying to interview you on this topic because I know you know a lot about this. So do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself before we jump in? I already feel like I gave them a lot of information, but anything else you would like to add to that about what you do? Because you're such an interesting person.
Well, one thing I think is rather interesting to know is that I have been very, very fortunate all my life to have a twin sister.
Wow.
And she has given me a lot of insight into, what life is about, and also, a really strong support throughout many, many, difficult times or good times. And I think it's rather interesting, the topic we're talking about today, going to be intuition, because there's a couple of stories I thought I might relate to my sister a bit too, as well as, other things that have happened in life, because it's such an intriguing topic.
It really is. I'm so glad that I can get you on this topic. And I'm sure that with twins, you have a lot of intuition going on both ways, right?
Absolutely. I mean, I have stories I could fill a book with probably, but I will not. At least not right today. No, I'm really, really lucky to have her.
Oh, that is so fantastic. Do you think intuition is important? And if so, do you think developing a strong intuition can serve us well in all aspects of our lives, including business?
I think you've got a couple of good questions there. Yes, I do think intuition is very important. I do think a lot of what happens is that people don't realize that they have intuition, which is sort of, I believe, an inner guidance, which can help us to make decisions, or to get a sense of if we're going in a good direction for our personal life or business or even health. And it is really one of the foundations that I think we in our Western society don't give enough value to, because everything has to be, very scientific, very proved, when in many cases you really don't need all that. You just need to be quiet for a minute, look inside, and get a sense of what, your own inner self is telling you, because really we're the best guides for what we need in our life, I think.
Most certainly. I so agree with you on that. And thank you for sharing that. So I have another question here for you. How do you think a strong intuition can serve us well in our day-to-day business decisions and processes?
I do believe that strong intuition can be a very useful tool in our daily business decisions. I rely on mine quite a bit because I consider myself a small business entrepreneur, and I don't have a lot of business processes and, a lot of staff around to help give me advice or whatever. So what I try to do is, if I've got a decision to make or a problem to approach, is to see what the different steps are that I need to do. And then if something feels like it's complicated or I don't have all the information, I'll sit and think, does this feel right to go in this direction or in that direction? For example, you could make a mind map or a logic diagram of, you've got different options of doing this, this, or this. And then I'll get a sense of, this seems to me to be a good way to go because I have, the resources to do it, or I know that I can handle it. Whereas sometimes if I have to make a decision really quickly. And I don't get a chance to get a inner sense of, is it a good thing to do or not?
Yeah.
Often I find I'm going in not a good direction, or I take on too much that I really couldn't handle, but, for some reason I wanted to say yes, or it sounded really exciting and I didn't think things through. I think that intuition goes hand in hand with careful thinking and logic. The two of them really go hand in hand.
Yeah, I agree with that too. I have found that whether I use my logic or my intuition, I always play into the other one on purpose, because I feel like you don't get all the information you need solely from your logical side, but you also don't get all the facts from your intuition. You kind of learn to hybrid them, won't you say?
Oh, absolutely, because sometimes it's hard to know. You can say, is it my intuition giving me the information I need, or is it like a feeling? Now, there's a difference between intuition and feelings, because sometimes you can have certain feelings which may not be true, because maybe you're overstressed, or you're tired, or you're hungry, and that can make your mind focus on things that are not exactly, if you're in your top form. That's the time to use your intuition, not when you're tired. What they say, hungry, angry, low, or tired. That's called halt, and that is not a great time anywhere to make decisions that are very important.
Yes, I personally find that when I feel scared, when I'm presented with a situation that feels like it's above my pay grade, or it just feels scary because it's new and I'm not certain how to respond in the situation, that is a really bad time for me to try and make any good decisions. I have to wait until that feeling passes, or I have to work through those feelings first, because I totally agree with you. I don't think intuition is just feelings or emotions. It's something more constant and something more sophisticated within us that we can listen to, but we cannot hear the voice of our intuition. I almost want to say, if we are too stressed out or too frustrated or too, like you say, hungry, angry, tired, right? All those things.
Yeah. Well, the thing is with intuition, you really have to be what is a popular phrase, in the now, or it also can be called being mindful, in that you're really focused right now, and you're not thinking about things in the future or things in the past, but really right now, what's going on, what's important. And if you can learn to do that, then that will just give your intuition a boost, because I believe we all have intuition, but we don't all necessarily use it, in a concrete way. Some people will know that this is a right decision, but other people, maybe you can train yourself.
Yes. For me, it's very interesting, because when I become super stressed about anything, the way I do it and call my intuition forward, if I can say it like that, is I actually go to my studio and I make art. Because when you're making art, you have to be present with what you're doing. And it calms me down and it focuses me. And it's almost like a calibration of my inner compass. And then it's like, okay, now I can hear my own voice. I can think clearly. I can make decisions. And I find that as I'm creating my art, even if I'm not consciously thinking about a specific problem or a specific solution, the answers come. Do you find that?
I do. Now, I personally, don't use art in that way. What I use is something, we're all creative in our own ways.
Oh, definitely.
I like to use what I call positive affirmations.
Oh, yes.
I have a goal in mind, and then there are certain characteristics I want to have working in my life. For example, saying, I would say something like, I always make great decisions. I know that I am going forward in a positive way. There's different things that you can come up with. And I like to come up with them with my clients or even for myself. And they really are very helpful because they keep you moving forward as well.
Oh, yes. Yes. It's so important. There's so many negative voices all around us, right? Or doubt or fear. And so that kind of leads me to my next question. Carol, how do you think we can know the difference between having a true, strong, intuitive sense about something or someone and just being fearful or doubtful on the other end of the spectrum? Because this is something I sometimes struggle with. I have to really figure out, am I just being doubtful or fearful or being an overthinker, or is this really my intuition speaking? How can we tell the difference?
Well, I think this takes us back to a point that we were talking about a bit earlier about feelings.
Yes.
Because a lot of our conceptions about people or events can be based on feelings that are triggered because of the circumstances or the way a person is. For example, you can be interacting with a person one-on-one, and you can see their body language,
oh, yes,
their, facial things, how they're reacting. And you can sense things just from visually seeing them. But if you're talking to a person and you don't have them in front of you, let's say on the telephone, then you have to rely on cues from their language.
I hear you.
Sort of what they're saying. And
yes.
That, excuse me. That can trigger things that, push your buttons or whatever. So you have to be
yes.
careful. Like if you're getting something extremely negative or maybe overly enthusiastic in yourself, maybe just take a second to think, where's this coming from? And if you can't, maybe see if you can put off that decision for a little bit, and then examine what was going on. So I think if you're feeling like good, relaxed, joyful,
yes,
happy, then it's a reliable sign that it's your wisdom talking, and you should listen because it's guiding you. But if you feel all jangled and, all over the place, and as you say, stressed, this is not a good idea or time to be making
yes.
really important decisions. Really.
Yes. One of the things that stand out for me when it comes to business is I've learned this over the years, and I feel in many ways I'm kind of new at being a CEO of my own business, and I'm new at a lot of things that you probably have a lot of experience with. But one of the things that I find is really powerful for me is I have learned the minute they can be well-intentioned. It doesn't mean they have bad intentions. You may even like the person a lot. But the minute someone tries to pressure you into a business decision, a partnership, or purchasing a service or a product or anything, the minute you are pressured or cornered, that feeling you get when you're cornered by someone and it's like they want to squeeze a yes out of you. When I get that feeling, I know that doesn't matter what is going on with the person or the situation, I need to buy myself some time because I need to think this through, because I don't like making choices that are very important in my business under a lot of pressure. And I don't think it's okay for people to put you in that situation. That's just me personally. But that's one way that I've learned to use my intuition. The minute someone puts me like against my back against the wall, I'm like, you know what? I'm going to buy myself some time here. And even if they tell me this deal is only good for the next half hour, I'm not going to allow them to pressure me into something I'm not sure about. Does that make sense? Is that a good way for me to use my intuition?
No, I do agree because, for example, I get a lot of emails
yes.
from, different companies or, people selling this and that, and it's very much like you say, there's this time limit, or if
yes.
you don't get this, then, your business isn't going to be great. Or if you do, you're going to be making, X thousands of dollars,
Oh, yeah.
5 days, and things like that. That's the sort of thing, like you're saying, the pressure. This definitely, if you have to make a decision based on that, that is not going to be letting your intuition guide you, except to say this is not going to happen in a good way. So I do agree you need to give yourself a bit of time, or just, say, I'm just not going in that direction.
Oh, definitely. Definitely. I think sometimes, maybe especially if we're inexperienced or very young or very new at doing a certain thing in business, we may feel that pressure of, I don't want to miss an opportunity. But I don't think we should look at that, because there will always be another opportunity, another course coming along when you may be more ready. And there's no need to be pressured into things prematurely, or just to be manipulated into things. When I get that feeling of someone manipulating me, I don't like that. So
well, I think when you see those sort of tactics, it makes you realize that is not the type of business person you want to be. That's not the path you want to go down.
Definitely.
So, in a sense, it's positive that way, that it shows you, I don't want to model that behavior or that way of being. On the
Very
other
true.
hand, there comes a point when you have to look at yourself and say, I don't need all these things, because now I'm ready to stand up and I'm going to be the expert, and I am the expert, and I don't need all these things. So there'll come a time when your intuition will just let you know that maybe it's time to, stand up and be counted. And I'm sure in, your creative art life and that, you make a lot of really wonderful pieces, and then suddenly it's time to stop on this because it's perfect the way it is.
Yes, it's very interesting. I think it was Da Vinci who said art is never completed, it's only abandoned. We reach a point where we just intuitively know it's time to stop. It's very true.
I agree there, because you could keep adding, a little bit more color, a few more lines, but then it could totally change what you're trying to convey.
Yes.
And there is a point that something is complete, I think.
Oh, definitely, definitely. And with that, we're going to conclude part 2 of our show today, and we'll be back in a few minutes and just wrap things up with Carol in part 3 of Your Creative Force today. And our show theme for today being utilizing your intuition. We're interviewing Carol Davies. We'll be back shortly.
Talent is a flame. Genius is a fire. And now we return to our show with your host, Avianne.
Back with part 3 of our show, episode 27, Your Creative Force, and our theme for today is utilizing intuition, and we're talking with Carol. So Carol, just to wrap up our interview, I want to ask you 2 more questions. The first question I want to ask you is, can you give us some examples of how a strong intuition has served you well in your own life and business?
Oh, definitely. As I say, I have over the years learned, to use and accept my intuition, because when I thought back over important decisions I'd made, earlier in life, I may not have thought about it as intuition, but I always knew that if something seemed like a very difficult decision and I didn't know what to do, I should stop for a little while, get more information, consult people, or maybe it just was not a good direction to go. And that's more, for example, maybe in business, because for me, when I finished working, I was working at the United Nations for quite a long time. And then I decided that it was time to leave, and I was looking for another career. So to me, it was not difficult to figure out that coaching was the way for me to go, because I had all these strengths and talents as a coach in my job.
Yes.
And I just thought, well, how would that be? And then all of a sudden things happened, like opportunity came up that I could do my training through the telephone while I was living overseas. And I got my, credentials and certification. And then when I came back to Canada, I was all set to go. And then I thought, well, gee, what else can I do? And then there were 2 or 3 specializations that popped up that I was very interested in and studied. So all of those were really easy decisions because they aligned with how I was. And it was done not in a rush, but just, one thing led to another, another. And I just think that is so easy to do, because they often call it being, in the flow. When you are connected to what you know is important for you and how you are as a person, then making decisions becomes a lot easier if they are, sort of in alignment to those beliefs. It's when you try to go in a direction that is not compatible to who you are as a person, I think, that really not great things can happen.
Yes, for me, I think, there's so many different ways one can describe it. I describe a lot of what you're talking about as what I personally experience as being my own inner creative force. It's like if I tap into that, it's like I know who I am, I know what I want, I know the timing of things. And it's a very intuitive thing. It's a weird thing. Like I can't very much, it's hard for me to formulate it, right? Like if I had to put this into a recipe, I couldn't do it because it's just so different every time. But I find that what you say is absolutely true for me. If I'm doing my creative thing and I tap into that inner creative power, that knowledge, that inner knowledge we already have about who we are and what we want to do in life. It doesn't matter what area of life, right? It can be as a parent, it can be as a business owner, but that has such power to give you answers. And it's very interesting because I came across coaches many times in the last 2 to 3 years that try and tell me it's never going to be the right time. You have to do it now. And maybe they are more successful than me in certain ways, but I really just don't agree with that. I feel like things need to line up for me, and I do believe in timing very strongly, because timing is for me very important. I'm not going to be willing to sacrifice certain things just to absolutely force something into reality. If I feel like I have to force something, it's just, it messes me up. It feels like it's not working. It feels like the clock inside gets broken. Does that make sense?
Oh, absolutely, because I do believe that most people feel much happier when their life is going in a good direction and they feel supported.
Yes.
And they're making, decisions that add value and good things to their life. Whereas if you make, really, like, let's call them bad decisions, or you go in a direction that isn't really meant for you, then that's when so many stresses and problems come up. And sometimes there'll be a little voice that say, do you really want to do that? And you ignore it and go down that path. And then you think later on, gee, I wish I had listened to that voice. Because in a way, intuition, you can call it your inner voice, like you were calling it your inner creative force.
Yes.
And we need to learn to listen to that because it's important.
I do think so. I really do think so. So, Carol, I have one more question for you. I feel so lucky to have you here today, and I will definitely make sure I give people a way to connect with you if they want to at the end of part 3 today. But yes, I want to ask you, if you were talking to me and I come to you and I'm a super young person who doesn't really have a well-developed sense of intuition, or I'm just someone, maybe I'm a little older, but I've never really had that confidence to trust my intuition. How do you think I can learn to trust my own instincts or intuitive sense about people and situations more?
Well, with myself and also with clients that I work with, I've got 5 suggestions that I will recommend to them if they're not, really strong in using intuition. And one thing is to get yourself centered and just do deep breathing for maybe 2 or 3 minutes. Just breathe in, breathe out, breathe in, breathe out, so that you really become aware of your body, what you're feeling, the area around you. And then if there's a decision to make, I ask myself, or the client will ask them, how do I feel about this decision? And then examine what comes to mind. If it feels good and positive, then I focus on the sensations in the body.
Okay.
If you feel light, if you feel like you're present, relaxed, that's probably going to be a good decision to make. If not, if I feel anxiety or fear or something heavy weighing on me, then I think maybe this is not a good decision. And then if I diagnose, or let's say the client diagnoses that they've got fear feeding into them, examine, where's the fear coming from? Is it that maybe you don't have enough resources to do it, or a deadline is too tight, or you don't know enough, whatever? And then after seeing all that, deciding that, okay, if it's not going to be a good decision, but you'd still like to pursue that maybe further as a goal, just start thinking, well, what more would I need to accomplish that? And then your inner voice will give you suggestions as maybe, get more training, or, maybe ask people to help you, or get some more, knowledge about an area, things like that.
Yeah,
centering yourself.
Yeah, it's so cool that you say that, because I find that a lot. Like, usually when I get fear about something, it's weird. It's like my intuition is telling me to do something, right? But I have this fear block. And usually if I do what you're saying and I just kind of get calm about the situation and think it through, and like you say, focus on what is really coming to the forefront for me, usually the solution is something like, okay, this is something you really want or really need to do in your business, but maybe you just need to run the numbers. Maybe you need to gather more information. And then I actually have like a practical, doable step that I can follow, right? And then I know, okay, if I do the numbers and the numbers don't add up, maybe this is something for me, but maybe it's not the right timing, right? And then I have so much more confidence in my decisions, right, Carol?
Oh, I really think so, because if it's a good or a right decision, you feel uplifted, you feel like it's right, you just don't feel tied to fear. You know where you're going. You feel probably calm and somewhat inspired or excited to get going on something.
Yes.
The one phrase that comes to mind, it just feels right.
Yes. And it's once again, it's very hard to explain or quantify, because it's often subconscious, and it's not something you can put into a formula, right? There's no recipe, because each person is so different.
Oh, absolutely. Because really, when you think about intuition, it's really something inside you that helps you and teaches you, because we're always learning in life.
Oh, yes.
We don't know everything, and it's sort of a mechanism that helps us learn, I think.
Oh, definitely, definitely. I'm very inspired by the artist Michelangelo, and he was asked late in his life, he was already deep into his 80s, when they asked him what is the big secret of his amazing art that he can share with the world. And he actually said, I am still learning. That was his answer. So,
and I mean, when you think about that, the man was a genius.
Yes, and that was after he created all those famous artworks, right? He was saying, and it was so wonderful. Actually, if you read about his life, near the end of his life, his only regret, he didn't have regrets. Like, he lived in a very tumultuous time. There was a lot of war, a lot of striving, a lot of poverty, and he had a lot of personal struggles, and he had a very hard life. If you ever read about his life story, he had a very, very difficult life. And at the end of his life, he was writing and contemplating, and he even made a sculpture about a hooded figure. And he said his regret is that he couldn't live longer to make more art. That was his only regret. And I always think to myself, what a wonderful regret to have, right?
Oh, I mean, absolutely.
Is that he was so happy and satisfied in spite of all the hardships, in spite of how people really used and abused him in many ways throughout his life. His passion and his desire to be great and his love for who he was and what he did with his life was just so powerful that it just kind of canceled out a lot of that stuff for him. And I just always think of that in my own journey.
Interesting you mentioned that, because several years ago I read the book about him that was called The Agony and the Ecstasy, and
yes.
I mean, that was a really that was a large book, but I started reading that and I was as fascinated as what you're saying now. It was so uplifting and inspiring that, the background he had and then where he ended up. And yet he still, as you say, was learning and creating until the end of his life. And that's what kept him going.
Oh, yes, definitely. Carol, this has been absolutely amazing. I feel like I can talk to you for hours, but we do have a time constraint and I'm very aware of it. I know you are a busy lady. So I want to thank you. And maybe in conclusion, if you can just tell people how they can get connected to you, if they would like to be connected with you and find out more about you and maybe even be coached by you or even interview you for another show maybe or something. How can people get hold of you?
Well, I'm always reachable through my website, and that is www.thepassionmotivator. That's THEPASSION and then motivator.com.
Okay.
Or my email is coachcaroldavies@gmail.com.
Fantastic.
People can easily get a hold of me that way.
Very, very cool. So Coach Carol Davies@gmail.com, right? Or thepassionmotivator.com.
Yes.
Fantastic. What a wonderful website. The Passion Motivator. It's awesome. Well, Carol, I have a feeling we'll be speaking again in future. Thank you so much for being our guest today and good luck with everything. And wow, it's been such an honor to interview you today.
Oh, it's been a great joy for me as well. And it's been a fascinating topic. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Carol. All the best. Oh my, wasn't that amazing? I really enjoyed interviewing Carol. Carol is such an inspiration. Carol, if you're there still listening, I hope you know that right now I feel like I can go to my studio and paint a Michelangelo just from speaking to you for the last half an hour or so. Wow, what an inspiration. I'm going to give you a little bit more background on Carol before I officially end the show because she is such a fascinating lady and she's got such a long track record. I really feel like if you connect with Carol on anything that you feel she may be able to help you with, you're going to totally not be sorry to do this. Okay. Carol is excited to offer her Hope, Have Optimal Personal Excellence program. Together with her clients, she helps design strategies for success for them to achieve emotionally work-life balance. Clients learn to manage life's challenges more easily by defining a plan to deal with an issue, breaking it down into manageable goals on which to work towards habits and success. Then they learn a variety of empowering and self-help techniques that strengthen and enrich their lives. This is what makes her work thrilling, helping women unravel old stories that are running their lives and create new possibilities in a moment. Isn't that awesome? Carol is also a well-known writer, speaker, and podcaster. She facilitates seminars and workshops for issues such as motivation, lack of confidence, decision-making, dealing with difficult people, social phobia or anxiety, developing a success mindset, stress reduction, among others. Ms. Davies encourages women to take their lives into their own hands. She firmly believes happiness is a choice, be it relationship issues or problems with your health or confusion in your career. Her comprehensive approach will help you bring your life into alignment, ensuring that you live a life of balance and happiness. She is the founder of the Passion Motivator coaching company at www.thepassionmotivator.com. Okay. So go to thepassionmotivator.com or coach Carol Davies at gmail.com and you can totally connect with Carol. She's also on social media. So if you type in Carol Davies and you type in Passion Motivator, I'm sure you can find her on social media as well. As the Passion Motivator, she helps clients find their passion, set goals, devise a personal life plan, and achieve success. Oh my gosh. Carol is super in tune with her creative force, don't you think? And on that lovely note, I'm going to love and leave you guys. And my quote for today is one that I also was talking about with Carol from the very famous artist Michelangelo, that was asked near the end of his life, what is his big takeaway, right? And Michelangelo said, I am still learning. Keep learning, keep living, and I'll see you back here on Your Creative Force. Until next time.
Talent is a flame. Genius, a fire. Visit us at artbyavian.com. Tune in next time as we explore your creative force. Thank you for listening.